The Federal Reserve set to kick off its latest policy meeting tomorrow. Months ago, many in the market thought the Fed would be ready to cut rates around this time, but things have changed since then. And joining us now, former Dallas Fed President Richard Fisher. He's a senior advisor at Jefferies and serves on the board of Tenet Healthcare, Warner Brothers Discovery, also a CNBC contributor. And we had, Richard, it's good to see you, especially on set. And earlier, a couple of things that struck me. We had Oksana Aronoff from J.P. Morgan, and I don't know whether you saw that, but we talked about, whether we're still going to cut, whether the Fed's going to stay where they are, whether a rate hike could be, in the offing. She said that when Powell was sure that we would be able to cut, that was transitory 2.0, and she thinks that getting down to 2% on inflation is going to be very difficult. She also made the point that the difference between, why don't we do 2 3/4? That is a big difference in something the Fed, I don't think, has any stomach for. And that led to the idea we may need to have a rise in unemployment to much higher levels for the Fed to get this under control.
Joe, unemployment is still historically low, right? 3.9%, whatever it is, around that, less than 4%. So when I was at the Fed, we thought 6% unemployment would, that is, if we went below that, it would trigger inflationary impulses. Times have changed, technology's advanced, et cetera, but it's still a low number. And the fact is, the inflation fight is not easy. So you'll remember on this show, I used to ridicule the idea of 6 cuts. Goldman Sachs first came out with that.
Right.
And even 3 cuts.
Right.
So I wouldn't be surprised. This meeting, obviously, everyone's expecting to hold steady. They'll announce something on the balance sheet, reducing their Treasury runoff. And that's an accommodative move in and of itself. But I'm not sure we'll have 2 cuts, 1 cut, or no cuts for the rest of the year. No doubt the risk is leaning towards the 1 to no cuts for the rest of the year. We'll see.
Are we restrictive right now?
I don't think, according to financial markets, you look at spreads and everything else, we don't seem to be terribly restrictive.
Then why do anything, even
I agree,
the slightest bit accommodative?
Well, you know me, I was hawkish, right? So I would be arguing, if I were still at the table, why do we need to do anything right now? Now, the balance sheet's another story. And I can see them, I don't know what, everybody expects the number to go down to $30 billion a month gradually over time. We'll have to see what they do. But, they're running $60 billion a month on Treasury accumulation. The biggest problem right now, Joe, are the Treasury auctions. Everything's been front-loaded. Obviously, assuming rates might come down, if that's what Yellen was assuming. And here we are, in the 5s. That's expensive money. A year and a half ago, it was 2%. The cost of carry has gone up big time.
That's an excellent point. We don't talk enough about that.
Thank you, Becky.
Yeah.
We all wish that maybe the economy was free to do what it wanted to do, and maybe the Fed wasn't such a big part of our lives.
Right.
But in general, in the last 10, 15 years, has the Fed made more correct decisions, or have they caused some of our problems? The reason I'm getting all of this to get to where we've been recently with political influence on the Fed, and whether there is some legitimate reasons to want a Taylor rule, or whether there's some legitimate reasons to try and get the Fed to be more rules-based and less seat of the pants. And I'm not saying that President Trump knows what the right thing to do is, but I'm not saying that President Biden, who would probably like lower rates too. I don't think anyone should be able to influence the Fed, but I don't think the Fed is a great system either.
I argued when I was at the table at the FOMC that cutting rates to 0, keeping them on too long, a third round of quantitative easing, which I voted against, and I had the vote, would end up in tears because you distort price discovery. So rules-based is one thing, but that's not what I'm hearing. Whoever wrote that paper for Trump, I don't think has any sense of history whatsoever.
Right.
Every time we've had executive control over the Fed or a central bank,
we go lower.
Weimar Republic, Argentina, Zimbabwe, Arthur Burns.
They always went lower.
Disaster.
Yeah.
And now we see that Joe Biden's staff is urging him to beat up on the Fed. I can tell you this. I think I know Jay Powell very well as a friend. He could care less. it's kind of nice to have symmetrical beating up, right?
It is.
You got both
But
sides.
then we're left with the foibles of I mean, love Jay Power or him. You're left with he is having gut feelings about what to do, which aren't always right.
It's not just Jay Powell; it's the entire committee.
And you do need the entire committee.
And remember, the committee was the one that was plotting their dots to say we might have 3 cuts. And remember, every time Powell has spoken about this, he said it's not a forecast.
Yeah, but last time he said we're not ready, but we're really close. Yeah. Were we really close at that point? I
think we're getting closer, but it's not.
To being able to cut, why?
It's not there yet.
Why are we getting closer? The last mile it seems harder for inflation.
It is hard, and it's going to be really hard to get there, and they're not going to deter. No central banker in the world wants to get out of the 2% target because what it does undermines confidence. You set a hard rule, and then you wiggle on it. It's not going to work.
I don't know if you saw Professor Stiglitz last week. Maybe you didn't. But did you understand the inflation argument, Andrew? Why he said 4 or 5 inflation is...
I didn't.
4 or 5% is really good, and it's what we should be
because of the cost on debt.
Is that what he meant? That's what I thought that's what
he was.
That's
arguing,
what I.
But I'm not
well,
sure.
He wants to debase the debt.
Right.
I mean, Joe's a lefty. Let's face it.
Right.
And so.
Well, use that as a pejorative. Did you just use that in a disparaging way?
Well, I just think he's left of center.
Yeah, left to center, almost comes all the way around to the other
a smart guy, Nobel laureate, blah,
right.
blah, blah. But the idea that you would debase debt using inflation is a dangerous concept.
Okay, so in your heart of hearts, you don't think we're going to get a cut, do you, this year?
I think it's unlikely, still possible. And
the markets,
cut,
is that okay with the markets?
They have to learn how to discount things. The market's been living on free money forever. Now it's a different ballgame. And I do think a lot of decision makers still are saying, please, God, please, God, please,
is
God,
unemployment
bail
going
me
up?
out.
So, is unemployment going up?
It should, as the economy slows. But right now, we're still below 4%. That's a good number.
Were you surprised at the GDP?
Well, we'll see how it gets revised. Remember, that's the first report. There are 2 more revisions. We'll have to see. I don't see it in my state. My state's growing rapidly, twice as rapid as anybody else in the country.